theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Wrong reviews it all on Joy Drive.
Hello, Suzy Wrong.
Hello, Warren. What is your opinion about the idea that masculinity is in crisis?
Good. That's my opinion. Well, I suppose what's the crisis? Is it that the toxic masculinity doesn't know where to go anymore, or what's the problem with it? Is it the manosphere?
Yeah. Why do you think that manosphere has risen up? Well, why has it established itself? Why is it a real thing now?
I don't know. Well, obviously social media and the ability of people to reach people is one thing. And I think the other thing too is that sense of wanting to belong to, what is it that we identify with if we're men? I'm not an expert in that field, but let's face it, toxic masculinity was pretty horrid for most of us as we were growing up and our formative years. I certainly struggled with it. When I see some of the things happening in football at the moment, I think immediately this is where I feel like a lot of it has ended up as well. So, yeah, you know what? I think masculinity needs a good mirror held up to itself. Have a look at it. And, that's my opinion.
It's a very different thing, right? Whether you're gay or you're not, the meaning of masculinity. I think I'm assuming that for you, masculinity didn't kind of give you an identity crisis very much, did it?
No, it didn't give me an identity crisis. No, not at all. I think, mind you, I feel like, as gays, we can easily start to try and, impersonate that masculinity to try and make ourselves probably feel a bit better. I don't know what the reason is behind it, but you do see that as well. But certainly, no, masculinity wasn't. I didn't want to be like them. I never wanted to be like them. I thought, no, I don't find you. The bullying, that I just didn't like. What was wrong with wanting to have girls as friends? What was wrong with not wanting to do the typical male sports? I never thought, I wish I could. I wish I could play football. I wish I could play cricket. I was more, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't have to do it. And then when I was forced to sort of do those masculine things, I failed miserably and got laughed at, like a lot of people do. But I never wanted to do it. It was more I was forced to do it because that was what was accepted to be the norm. But if I had my way, I wouldn't have gone anywhere near it. I hated those boys. I didn't want to hang out with them at all. No, nothing at all. What about you, Suzy? What was it like in Singapore?
Well, I think, for me, it's very, very complicated. Like, I think I remember seeing that if you're able to have those qualities, those sort of masculine qualities, that you would have a leg up on things. Like, it was very clear that it had its advantages. So I think in a way, I think about young men today, I think that maybe they feel like, on one hand, some people are demonstrating that there are these old values that are termed toxic by some, that actually they would give them advantages. So maybe it's that. At the same time, I feel like that their worlds can be a little bit, there's a mixed messaging that's happening that didn't happen in our generation, where on one hand, masculinity is represented in one way, in a more traditional way now, and then on the other hand, masculinity is also offered, in alternate ways, and I think maybe that there is a confusion there. It's interesting to see how young men are doing masculinity. I think just because, the manosphere has come up, it doesn't mean that all the young men are really into it. I feel like very few are. The real people I meet in life on the street, very rarely do I see that in the reflected in the young people I meet. I feel that in the new generation, they're much more open to all kinds of ways of being men, and I think that is so healthy. But the evidence is that in social media and in the podcasting world especially, there's this the huge popularity of that kind of toxic masculine representations. That's a cause for concern. So I thought, what's it about? I feel like maybe it's about that confusion.
Is it that these people who portray themselves to be really, macho and masculine, are they hiding something underneath? Are they hiding something that, I don't know, that they can mask?
Well, I think it's masking a lot of insecurity. I think we all grow up with insecurity, I would assume. I think very, very rare do young people turn out very self-possessed at a very young age. We all have to figure ourselves out before we get a level of self-esteem. So I think insecurity is a common denominator, and how we work with that, how we get out of insecurity. I guess there are many different ways, and some people kind of use really toxic ways to make themselves feel better. And, we can see and criticize that it's all very fake and it's all an act, but maybe the experience of it when you are going through it, when you are doing it to yourself, maybe it feels real.
I mean, the thing for me is it's easy to criticize people. I want to be careful how I say this, but I feel like, these people need to be engaged with and spoken with and have conversations with, because I feel like it's easy to point fingers and demonize, and I can do that just as good as anyone else. But if we judge them without listening to them, then how do we get through to them and change
That's
their
absolutely
perspective?
true. I think that shaming people has been very trendy for quite a few years. But I do feel like, evidence shows that it's not very helpful. It's maybe a comforting thing for the person that's doing the shaming to be able to identify what's good and what's bad and point out the bad. But for the person that's being shamed, it almost has the opposite effect, doesn't it? It makes you kind of double down a little bit now. We see that happen a lot.
I think so too. I mean, I felt very sad this week with one of the interviews that I did here on Drive, and we were talking about the AFL and the tribunal reducing a penalty for some homophobic slurs, and I felt really sad about it because I almost felt like this is almost, and this is one of the reasons that I don't follow football, is I almost feel like it's a repository for these people that can continue to behave like this without sort of being aware of what their behaviour does to other people, not only people watching, but colleagues who perhaps are playing or involved with them, or prospective colleagues. It has such an impact on people. And I feel like this type of masculine male has gone through life, gone through school, and now is being fostered in a professional sporting code to continue with this behaviour. Where is the accountability? Where does someone sit down with them and say, hey, do you realise what happens when you say this or when you do this to people? Do you realise what happens? Maybe let's bring some other people in and say how it makes them feel and have a conversation with them. Where's it stop? Rather than just hiding in little pockets of society that allow this behaviour to continue.
Yeah. Talking about this behaviour, we've got this week's program, this week's new show on Netflix.
Half Man. Now, Suzy, tell us.
On Stan, sorry. It's on Stan. Yeah.
What do you think of it?
Niall completely freaks out when Ruben arrives at his wedding. The shocking intensity of their encounter is a mystery. So we flash back 2 years ago to find out what the story is behind this relationship. Half Man began screening last week on Stan, and in the first episode, we see the two as teenagers, with Ruben moving into Niall's bedroom after a stint in prison. They are not blood brothers, but have to live together because their mothers are dating each other. And all four of them must squeeze into a small, low-income Glaswegian household. Niall is bookish, and Ruben is rough as guts. Niall is bullied at school, and Ruben takes it upon him to be protector, thus begins their unlikely connection. Sleeping in a small room gets complicated, however, and we see in the first episode the beginnings of a sexual dynamic forming between the two. Half Man is expected to be 6 episodes long, so it is early days yet. And while we don't yet know what the real substance of the story is going to be, my curiosity is certainly piqued after this first week. The characters are intriguing, their circumstances are fascinating, and the general style and tone of the show is very dramatic and a little sexy in a hyper-masculine kind of way. The theme of violence figures prominently in Half Man. Ruben has a wild and hot temper. When asking Niall about the bully, we can see him delighting in the prospect of inflicting harm on other students at the school. There is a juxtaposition between that thirst for violence and an obvious need for tenderness in how Ruben approaches Niall, a contrast that forms the basis for what I hope is going to be a fruitful exploration of masculinity. At this early juncture, however, there is a risk of gay baiting surfacing or of homosexuality being framed in a regressive way, but all that remains to be seen. It looks like shame could be a theme that will be looked at, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and I'm certainly hoping for a refreshing take on internalized homophobia over the coming weeks. Warren, have you ever found yourself in a physical altercation?
No, I don't. No, only where I've gone to try and do martial arts and they've thrown me across the room. That's about it. But no, I haven't found myself in one. I'm probably lucky in that respect. I don't want to. But I found this, Suzy, this one's not an easy watch. As much as I enjoyed it, it's sort of about how male relationships can become intense, complicated, and sometimes quite destructive. And I struggled because I was watching, the bullies. That was hard to watch at the school and what they were doing, the impact they were having. But also, the half brother, if that's the right term, was a bully, a horrible bully himself. But I kind of had that cognitive dissonance where I was thinking, but I'm glad he's there because as uncomfortable as he is, he's also, there was part of him that was kind of a little bit, right, if you know what I mean. Like he'd shut down the other bullies, but I don't know if bullying, is a way to do it. But I just felt a bit uncomfortable watching that sort of dynamic happen, Suzy.
Yeah, it's very grim, isn't it? It's very dark. It's very grim. There is a lot of very ugly things about men that come up in this first episode. But I'm glad that it's presented, very explicitly. Like it's not dressed up in a lot of kind of glory or, this a weird machismo that some of these British shows can be. This one is very, very kind of it's presented as honest and ugly, and I did feel very conflicted when the bully got beaten up in a very bad way.
Yes.
Very, very bad way.
Yeah, it's conflicting.
And I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, this is terrible, but I'm quite happy to see that.
That's the problem. But then again, who are we to say we hate bullying, but we were glad that the bullies got bullied? I don't know. It's kind of that's where I felt a bit uncomfortable with it. It's it's less about bad men and it's more about how these patterns started in the first place, isn't it? Like what led to it. We don't know what the I was scared that they were going to imply that the mothers of both of them, being in a lesbian relationship, that was the cause. I was scared it was going to go down that path, but it didn't. Thank goodness. But that was my worry.
I think it points. It's quite clear, even though we're not given all the clues yet.
You're cutting out, Suzy. You're going quiet.
Hello. Are you hearing me?
Just.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think we're given enough clues to see where the tone of the show is going to go. I think it's going to show that this kind of really brutal form of masculinity is not going to serve you well. I don't think there's any question about that. The question is how they're going to incorporate their really slightly bizarre sexual relationship, how that's going to figure within this story about masculinity. And I look forward to seeing it.
Now, the other thing is too, when you can't be honest about who you are, it doesn't just sort of sit quietly, does it? You don't just, you know what, I can't be honest. It shows up everywhere. And I felt like that was the case in this show with one of the guys. The show is called Half Man. Suzy, some messages have come in. Masculinity definitely needs a do-over. It's damaging for everyone. Suzy, over to you to start a matriarchy. There you go. And we need better male role models. Pedro Pascal and Nick Offerman get my vote. There you go. There's some messages.
Yeah, I think there's really great masculinity to model. And when we use the words toxic masculinity together, it doesn't mean that all masculinity is toxic. It's just some of it can be toxic. So I think masculinity is still something that everyone can kind of learn, whether you're a man or a woman. There are things in our male role models that we can learn from, but there are certainly a lot of very bad traditional things that we really need to try to wipe off and remove.
Suzy Wrong, what are we watching next week?
My Dearest Senorita is a Spanish film coming to Netflix later this week. It tells a story about Adela, who discovers the truth about their own intersexuality. So that's My Dearest Senorita for when I see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.